LifePoint drove insights and boosted quality through its data migration. I'm Chris Sosa with Becker's Healthcare, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. Before we meet today's presenters, I will go over some quick housekeeping details. We will start today's webinar with a panel discussion, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. If at any time you're having trouble with the audio or slides, try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box, as we're here to help. With that, I'm very pleased to welcome today's speakers. Renee Jordan, Assistant Vice President of IT Clinical Analytics, is a member of LifePoint Healthcare's leadership team and is responsible for architecting data solutions to support organizational analysis, workflow, and data enrichment. This requires being innovative and finding the right platforms and vendor partners to accomplish these goals. Her background is varied. Renee has software development experience with both on-premise and cloud solutions. She has done point-to-point integration solutions as well as enterprise-level integration solutions. And her latest adventure is assisting LifePoint with its innovation roadmap, which includes data hydration and standardization. Cheryl Griffin is an experienced executive in the healthcare technology industry with a proven track record of delivering high-quality professional services to healthcare clients using SaaS solutions. As VP of Professional Services for Verato, Cheryl is responsible for leading and managing a team of professionals who provide implementation, customization, training, and consulting services to customers, ensuring that all customer engagements are successful and exceed expectations. She works closely with sales, product, and engineering teams to ensure that Verato solutions are designed and delivered with the customer's needs in mind. She also plays a key role in developing and implementing the company's overall customer experience strategy. Bonnie Bruner, MSN, RNBC, is an experienced healthcare professional with over 10 years of clinical and informatics experience focused on population health. In a role as Client Success Manager at Clinical Architecture, Bonnie serves health system enterprise clients with a variety of functions, including integrating disparate data systems, normalizing data syntactically and semantically, and solving issues related to master data management and organization-wide data governance. Bonnie earned her Master of Nursing degree with a concentration in informatics from Austin Peay State University and is an active participant in the Tennessee HIMSS chapter. Thank you all so much for being here today, and with that, I will turn the floor over to Bonnie to kick things off.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to start with kind of what we think is the objectives of the presentation, and they kind of flow with how the presentation is going to go. So the first is going to come from Renee at LifePoint. We're going to define the primary components of a big data strategy, learn critical steps for a successful migration, including the data harmonization and identity matching. Third, to gain insights into implementing technology to uniquely identify and match patients across a large health system, such as LifePoint. And then four, understand the value of implementing an enterprise data quality solution across a large health system, like LifePoint. And then five, we'll turn it back to Renee to help us identify best practices, lessons learned from assessing, planning, and executing processes for that big data solution. Just a bit about kind of what each company does, who we are. So to start off, Renee works for LifePoint. LifePoint was founded in 1999. They are a large health system, as we mentioned, and also considered an integrative delivery network. They have 60 community hospitals, 41 rehabilitation hospitals, 23 behavioral health hospitals, and over 300 additional sites of service. They're headquartered in Brentwood, but those additional sites of service go across about 31 states. LifePoint's mission is making communities healthier. Next is Cheryl, and works for Verato. They enable a complete and trusted 360-degree view of patients, consumers, members, providers, and communities. They're the industry's first purpose-built for healthcare identity management, and they help healthcare organizations achieve smarter growth, improved care quality and efficiency, and actionable insights. And they've been working with LifePoint since about the summer of 2022. And then lastly, the company that I work for, Clinical Architecture. Clinical Architecture is a healthcare enterprise data quality solution. We focus on managing, normalizing, and organizing vast amounts of disparate data. We have a leadership team that has health information technology experience throughout 30 years of that industry experience, and we serve healthcare systems. I primarily work with large healthcare systems, but we also serve clients like payers, life sciences, the government, and many more. And we've been working with LifePoint since about the fall of 2022, I should say. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Renee to talk about LifePoint's original drivers, what their big data strategy was, and ultimately the big data solution.
Thanks, Bonnie. Let me back it up. All right. So today we wanted to first talk about, why were we implementing a data strategy here at LifePoint? We've tried to do it for many years, but it's just with today's world, more and more reasons why you have to. So some of our original drivers that we had is that we wanted to populate our Google Health data engine, or HDE for short, with our hospital electronic healthcare record data. And we wanted this to come from streaming ADT data, and in which at LifePoint, we have various different formats of HL7. And if anybody knows anything about HL7, we all know it's truly not standard. And for us to be able to take this data, one of the attributes we wanted was to standardize the data so we can do analysis. So what that was going to require, besides building our Google GCP environment from the ground, as well as Google Health data engine from the ground, is that we needed to be able to identify a patient as being unique so that we would know Susie Smith at facility A was Susie Smith at facility B. We also were going to have to standardize this data across multiple applications, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. It also, with Google HDE, it requires ingesting the data in the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources FHIR format. Another element that we had is that we want to normalize and standardize some daily batch data from our 60 subacute hospitals. And we wanted to do this for our care variation improvement use case that we have, and it's still ongoing, as well as our national quality program measures. And this is going into our Health Catalyst analytical platform. And this is extremely, important to us because the whole idea for us for a data strategy is to drive the insights and analysis. So I have to brag about this one right now before we go any further. One of the things for care variation that we wanted to obtain is to decrease our mortality here at LifePoint. We've successfully been able to do it with the data migration strategy that we've had. We've implemented our improvements at 4 of our facilities from the insights we've gleaned, and as of today, we've been able to save 41 lives. So truly having the right data migration strategy does make a difference, and LifePoint cares so much about their patients. The other thing you need to understand that we had with trying to solve, how are we going to implement this strategy, is the complexity. LifePoint has a vast ecosystem. We have multiple networks. We have 10 different electronic health record applications, and we have 12 different emergency ED applications. And even if we have facilities with the same EHR system, which we do, it's not standard. It's not configured the same. So can you imagine trying to get the data out of all these various systems, and if they're not normalized or standardized, it's very hard to do analysis. So we had to come up with a good strategy. So what is LifePoint's big data strategy? Well, we felt like finding the right products and the right vendors that could support our 4 pillars of big data strategy would help us deliver value to our patients and our business. And it would also allow us to architect a solution for the current use cases, as well as any future use cases we may have. So what are the 4 pillars that we have? One is patient mastering. Again, that's so we know Susie Smith at facility A is Susie Smith at facility B. We also need to normalize the data. So that was our second pillar. Our third pillar is master data management, because there's other data that needs to be mastered, such as location and provider. Our fourth pillar is that we felt like we had to have format and protocol flexibility. And that's because data comes in various formats: batch, streaming, API, HL7, you name it, it's out there. And then between applications, when you need to integrate or provide data for operational, everybody needs different formats, right? So it has to be flexible in both those points. Okay, so what is LifePoint's big data solution? Well, for our first pillar, we were so excited to find Verato's UNPI. It provides a robust, proven, and referential matching in a patient mastering solution. For our second pillar, we were able to find Clinical Architecture Medical. It creates symptomatically normalized data across LifePoint's various EHRs and various configurations of EHRs. For our third pillar, we're also using Clinical Architecture Medical because this can perform master data management. Our fourth pillar, we are using Clinical Architecture's Pivot because it empowers syntactic normalization, yielding format and protocol flexibility. Now I'd like to turn this over to Cheryl, who's going to talk about how Verato's patient mastering has helped LifePoint immensely and what else they can do for us.
Thanks, Renee. It's been an honor to participate and partner with you, with LifePoint, and with Clinical Architecture on your journey here around identity management and standing up one of your pillars and hopefully growing a lot going forward with you. You had described this method of establishing a very solid foundation, and that is so key, and we work so hard to do that with you. It started with the ability for LifePoint to recognize that they had to accept the challenge of actually knowing who is who in their organization that underpins everything, all their initiatives that they'll go forward with in that specific growth. So knowing who is what the Verato platform does support for LifePoint today. It supports their initial use case that was described, which is around care variation, and they saw great outcomes from that. But it also will support being able to move to from patients to locations, to providers, to consumers, and these other domains. So a very, very strong to the core establishment that now is on the platform and ready to go to help LifePoint make their data actionable. LifePoint decided to start around patient data, and they achieved this 360-degree view of the patients they serve. And you'll hear a little bit later, Bonnie's going to talk about liberating the data and what Renee was referring to around liberating the data. It's important to recognize that, on a journey with data, there's various use cases that will be realized at various times. So right now, Foundation moving to that journey of liberating the data is where we're going, and happy to be supporting here for those various uses around data quality initiatives, but also data mastering initiatives. There were a few 4 areas that we wanted to make sure that we got right when we established the foundation from the very start. And these are things that are very specific to healthcare, born in healthcare, and what Verato brings to the table specific to organizations like LifePoint. It's a identity platform, rock solid foundation for healthcare. In these 4 areas, we look at making sure that there's the best and most accurate solution deployed at LifePoint. There needs to be confidence in decisions and the data that are being used to be making decisions. In that, there needs to be the highest level of match accuracy, and that is done with referential matching with Verato, with an unparalleled data set. So it's really important to be accurate from that very start at the bottom before you rise up into the additional use cases. Another thing that is important that we have deployed there is that this solution, this foundation, is very dynamic in that it's born in the cloud. It's a modern platform. We know that LifePoint is going to want to be doing many things with it over time, and that solution is dynamic in terms of performance, speed, all the cloud things that you would expect. But also a lot of investment in making sure that it is growing over time and not a static solution. So that's an important aspect of laying down your identity foundation. Also, an important aspect is that the Verato solution is proven. The right partnerships, making sure that it's someone who understands the healthcare brand as Verato did, as Renee had mentioned, is important in being able to deploy and get value out of your solution, realize that first use case as fast as you possibly can, and efficiently and accurately as you possibly can. So Verato has nearly 100 respected brands in healthcare, and we brought that experience and expertise forth here at LifePoint. And then finally, can't live with a platform that's not secure, especially in healthcare. So LifePoint is assured that there's continuous threat monitoring, data is encrypted and REST and in motion, that we're HITRUST certified, SOC 2, HIPAA compliant, and all that. So that can't be underscored. It seems like table stakes, but it is something that we have to be very diligent in LifePoint. And I know we've seen and we've partnered around a lot of diligence around the security of that platform. So now that we have that foundation with those aspects in place, one of the things we look forward to doing next with LifePoint is moving from this care use case into other use cases in other areas, building on that foundation. And they're approaching this as a journey. So they're maturing their identity strategy and their solution off of this rock solid foundation. And they're going forward and recognizing where they can go. So they have started this journey around exploring the identities that they have in the organization. They know and they realize, like was said, that the people, the patients, the households, the locations, there's many variations on identity and what they can do. Patient was the initial focus, but we're able to grow from here and move along this maturity curve. When they focused on patient, then they moved to a kind of a doing stage of their journey where, okay, now we have the patients, and where is the patient data, and where's the excellence in the data, and where's the governance of that patient data? So all in making sure that we're able to provide that single source of truth, that 360-degree view, with data recognizing in that complex ecosystem that it is going to be segregated, but it can be brought together and matched together. As they're liberating data, LifePoint is looking forward to this vision of becoming more aware of the additional use cases, deploying the additional use cases, but beyond just clinical EHRs, specific areas. They will look to master the data around initiatives such as cloud transformation, digital engagement, clinical operability, and provider data integrity. So you heard a little bit around those various areas where they'll go next. And so to talk a little bit more about the detail of the foundation and additional pillars, I'm going to turn it over to clinical architecture and Bonnie again to describe where they've gone at LifePoint and then what's next on that journey.
Thank you, Cheryl. So I'd like to start off with a slide that I think highlights, you know, some of the struggles and maybe hidden struggles behind healthcare data. So like, why do we need a data quality solution? And to start, I think, you know, the tip of this iceberg metaphor, you know, are things like decision support and, you know, at the point of care, analytics, dashboards, being able to trend certain things, and ultimately, you know, AI and predictive analytics. What we don't typically see that has to happen before we kind of get to these components to, you know, provide ROI and improved outcomes and that sort of thing are, you know, things like discovering the data, where does it live, getting access to that sort of thing, aggregating the data into one place, and then being able to normalize, manage, and ultimately categorize the data. So what we see a lot, at least with my clients, is the bulk of the work, you know, many resources and cost are associated with kind of what's under the surface here. And, you know, additionally, I would say for these type things, you know, at the tip of the iceberg, we see a lot of resources like data scientists and that sort of thing that, you know, they really need to be kind of working in this area. But for every project, every use case, it could even be one data point within a particular analytic requires this work a lot of times to be done every single time for every single initiative. So I like this slide because I think it outlines, you know, kind of why you need a data quality solution, a patient matching solution, and highlights a problem that you may not know even exists unless you're that person that's really in the weeds, trying to get this information done and in a way that you can leverage it. So I'm going to break up the next two slides into kind of the full data quality solution that clinical architecture offers. And I've split it up into our Medical product and our Pivot product, although they do work cohesively. These are, you know, to kind of reference Renee's previous slides, this represents kind of the second and third pillar of their big data strategy. So I'll try to make this brief. There's a lot more to it than this slide, but to start off, we help organizations acquire data from those disparate systems, such as LifePoint EHRs, but it could also be, you know, lab systems, you know, claims data from payers, and we help acquire that data and then manage it if it's necessary. At the same time, we have a whole team of people who are dedicated to acquiring, you know, standard terminologies, publicly available terminologies like LOINC, CPT from the AMA, SNOMED, and that way you have kind of a centralized place to have that data and to keep it, know it's being updated by our team. So the second piece is we help organizations automate the process of standardizing and normalizing data. That can be to a standard terminology like LOINC. It doesn't necessarily have to be. We certainly have clients wanting to normalize this data to things like their own job codes that they've created themselves. So it doesn't have to be, but this is really where we have very sophisticated automation of the mapping of terminology. And then thirdly, we have tooling to model and essentially kind of roll up these concepts. So in this example, you can see multiple disparate systems of data sending in through Themetical doing the auto normalization, but that's still, around like 7 LOINC codes, and LOINC being the standard for lab, that roll up into one concept of hemoglobin A1C. And I think that's important because when you're trying to do, the end result of those analytics and decision support, your programmers, your data scientists, that sort of thing, they're working off one concept. And from a data governance perspective, there's an editorial policy behind what that concept means. And then ultimately, kind of once you get your data in a clean place and a clean format, you're able to really derive those meaningful insights that we talked about that were at the tip of the iceberg. And then, of course, lastly, getting value from that information. All right, so secondly is around our product called Pivot. And really, Pivot and Themetical go together. I kind of split them up because they have different pieces of functionality, but the idea with Pivot and still around, data quality is that Pivot is able to normalize data syntactically. So we talked about Themetical and how you can normalize the terminology or the language of the data. Pivot's expertise is around the syntax of the data. And so, this diagram describes being able to ingest multiple types of formats. Most commonly, we see things like HL7, CCDA, claims data. It's ingested into the Pivot product. Pivot essentially, understands that data. It actually, in the normalization process, works directly with Themetical to input the normalized terms within that. It has the ability to consolidate and deduplicate and even validate some of the data coming in. So if it gets a wacky number of like 100 for that hemoglobin A1C value, we can kind of catch that and say, that's not quite right. And then we can output really whatever format you want, but most commonly used are standard data models like FHIR, CCDA, and OMOP. We even have clients go HL7 to HL7 because there's various versions of HL7 v2. So, the ultimate goal is to be able to really translate that data in a way where it's not only speaking the same language, but it's in the format that you would want it to be. Okay, so I know this slide is busy, Mm. But it's the exact architecture we came up with for this LifePoint initiative. So a couple of things to highlight, I won't go over everything, is you can see, we start off with our kind of disparate data. This represents EHRs, but it's really facility focused, because even if you're on the same EHR, there's variation, within what's sent outbound, depending on the facility. You'll note the downstream consumers of this information are Health Catalyst and Google's HDE engine. But, the important part to note here is really kind of the foundation here, so that you can reuse the data and reuse this kind of foundational architecture for other use cases and initiatives. So you'll see here, data comes in via HL7 through LifePoint's interface engines. That is sent into Pivot. Again, like we talked about, Pivot is going to syntactically or canonically normalize those patient messages. It's going to leverage the medical to normalize the terminology data, reference data, like we talked about from those standard terminologies, the value set management, where we talked about being able to kind of roll up those link codes, and then ultimately master data management, in this case specifically around providers and locations. And it's important to note that before this data is sent outbound, in this case to these downstream consumers, we're calling a Verato API to make sure when we do that piece of normalization, we're inputting that unique patient identifier before that data is sent outbound. All right, I think that's it on this slide. So what were the actual results from the LifePoint initiative? I find these really impressive myself, but to note, from a terminology normalization and standardization, we mapped about 900,000 plus terms across these particular data domains. And, these are kind of groups of data domains, patient demographics, for example. You're going to see gender, race, ethnicity, those types of things. So all of those are translated into a standard terminology. In most cases, we're using things like what FHIR recommends or USCDI type terminologies. And then Pivot has ingested over 22 million messages today. And of course, the output is inclusive of that Verato UMPI. And I have to say, this is not a project necessarily for LifePoint. As our CEO would say, data quality and keeping it that way is not a project, it's a lifestyle. So this work continues to be done. This work continues to increase in that amount of data received and normalized. And then really impressively, Verato was able to have 4.7 million records loaded from 2019 to 2022. And that represented approximately 3.89 million unique patient identities. And of course, all of this was done for all 60 of LifePoint's facilities. And then timeline-wise, how long did it take for us to accomplish this? From the installation of the GCP and HDE environment setup to, when we did the systems integration with everyone, we onboarded the ADT, and we ultimately normalized the data that we talked about in previous slides to go live. It was approximately 3 months. And I just have to say, you know, I'm very biased towards our product and towards our company, but Verato was an incredible partner to work with. I don't think there was ever a time that, you know, Verato said, nope, we can't do that, good luck, or we said, no, that's not available. Everyone was really willing to kind of jump in and help. And then most importantly, LifePoint came to us with a plan. And by the time, you know, we got into this project, they had a really clear direction on what they wanted to happen. And at the same time, relied on us for expertise, you know, for what would be best practice around patient matching and data quality. So I think that's a testament to the success of this project. So, okay, that is it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Renee to talk about best practices, lessons learned, and then next steps for LifePoint.
Thanks, Bonnie. Well, what are some of LifePoint's best practices? Number one, I can't stress it enough, is you have to select the right vendor products and partners. Once again, they've got to meet your current needs as well as your future needs, you know, especially in your data strategy goals. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck implementing different solutions every time you have a new use case. You can't always know what the future holds, but if you pick products that are flexible enough, or you know from their architecture they're going to be able to grow, then that's what you need to do, so that way you can have a successful data strategy. The second best practice that we came away with this was that you have to create a multifaceted team of both the vendor and internal clinical, business, and IT company team members. This way you get a collaborative approach, and you have to do that with a big data strategy, because it's not done with one team, it's not done with one vendor. There are so many different facets that you need besides IT security, networking, your budgeting people, your leadership for approvals. It really does take a village with this one. And we recommend that you, from the onset, you identify the right people or know who to go to and get everyone on board. It has to come from leadership down. The third best practice that LifePoint found with this is that having weekly touch points, you know, especially the technical ones with the vendors, was really important. It has to be all vendors. And that's because every person and every vendor needs to understand the big solution. And so if you have everyone together and there's problems, then they'll see what each other needs or what the issues are, and then you can resolve it quickly. You still need to have your regular touch points with each vendor separately. But once again, like I said, having it with all vendors, it really works well. And so what are some of LifePoint's lessons learned? Well, when you're doing a patient mastering and you want your data, make sure that your historical data that you're going to master is from your actual applications that you're going to master the data from when you go live. We talked about LifePoint being very diverse and complex, which we are. Since we have multiple EHRs and we have different networks, you know, it's really difficult to get your historical data out. We took a shortcut against Verato's advice, but we took a shortcut because we knew we had patient data inside our Azure EDW data lake. And this did come from like patient accounting, which is really good data. We also got it from some other data lakes that was all consolidated in there. For the most part, the MRNs were basically the same, and it worked well. Verato's product worked so well, it could match, even though we were sending the HL7 data later from the actual application, matched it with no problem because of the referential database. But the thing that we saw is that when we were looking at the analysis inside the Verato application, because it has good analysis for you to look at your EMP, it skewed our numbers because you're not getting the true numbers out of that particular application that you're sending the ADT. You are getting data, out of Azure EDW. So it was just from the analysis perspective. And also another lesson learned, it takes time to see the fruit of the labor, because it doesn't happen quickly. And leadership may get antsy, especially when you're spending a lot of money to make the data strategy happen. So you have to think about it like this. Data strategy is like building a house. You need the foundation, the building blocks, and the roof before you can see the true value and finally enjoy living in the house. And remember, this is exactly what Bonnie was talking on, spot on with the iceberg. These are those elements that are underneath the water, right? Underneath the iceberg. So as you're doing this implementation, realize every time you're normalizing new data, standing up maybe a new product, you're adding value, but you just may not see it until everything comes together. And now, what's LifePoint's next steps? We've standardized and normalized ADT out of our EHRs, and we've also normalized and standardized some batch data for about 12 of our facilities to date, for the care variation and the national quality program. So right now we've also, mastered our patients out of our EHRs. So our next steps is we want to symptomatically normalize surgical scheduling and surgical case HL7 interface data, as well as some batch daily data. We want to start mastering location data. We want to master provider data. We also want to take this EMPI that we have and maybe use it for patient marketing campaigns, because a good example of this would be, we would not want to send out mailers, texts, or emails to a patient that's been to more than one facility. We want our patients to know we care. So, we need to know our patients, so we don't want to send multiples. Also, a thought process that we think we can use with our new data strategy is maybe solving some of our CMS regulatory data requirements. Because now, if we're out of one of these lake houses that we have standardized data, we should be able to write the logic once to create the data that we need for CMS and only have to change it in one place. Plus, it's normalized and standardized. And otherwise, we'd have to go to each EHR application. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us at Becker's webinar. I hope you've been able to glean some wonderful insights. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Chris, who's going to start our Q&A session.
Yes, thank you so much, Bonnie, Cheryl, and Renee, for a terrific discussion today. We're going to begin today's question and answer session. Please remember that you can submit any questions you have by typing them into the Q&A chat box on your webinar console. All right, first question. Renee, could you please speak to more about the 41 patients whose lives were saved by your focus on data quality around mortality rates? How did you do this?
Well, that was done in our Health Catalyst analytics. Remember how I talked about the teams that we have, both clinical, IT, and business? With that initiative, with the care variation, we have a clinical team at LifePoint, as well as a clinical team at Health Catalyst that are analyzing data. And we're trying to bring improvements by looking at the data that's coming out of the EHR, order sets, what's happening, looking at sepsis and heart failure. And by looking at different elements in our analysis, we're able to see improvement places where we can care for our patients better. And that was able to save 41 lives so far.
All right, next question. All right, Renee, this is also for you. So do you see LifePoint continuing to manage multiple EHRs and EMRs at the health system, or are you going to go with one EHR moving forward?
Oh, I wish. Well, we are in the process of reducing. LifePoint has grown over the years through acquisitions. And like I said, patient care is number one. And sometimes when you're doing that, it's hard to just say, hey, I'm going to rip out some systems, I'm going to move and just take care of things. We wanted to make sure, even when we acquire a new company, that patients come first and we'll worry about the infrastructure and technical debt. We do have a plan, and that's on the way, and we will get down hopefully to at least a couple of them.
Renee, looking back, would LifePoint implement your data strategy any differently than you have done?
You know, I would say no, only because of I couldn't be happier with the vendors and the products that we've done. The only thing where I hesitated with that was if there was a way that we could say, hey, let's not have to go as fast. That's the only thing. You know, in today's world, we have to move fast, right? We would love to have gone slower and then really say, oh, we're going to plan some other aspects and get to where we want to be. You know, I'm a perfectionist that I want to have the perfect world before we do anything, but you can't do that. So otherwise, I wouldn't change anything.
Next question. This is for you, Cheryl. How would you say that the universal identity platform LifePoint is using differs from other MDM solutions in healthcare?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about the Verato platform being purpose-built for healthcare. So like other MDM solutions, there's the basics of security, right? But you want to have a solution that, or those four things we talked about: accurate, proven, dynamic, and secure. But you don't need the stuff to be bogged down from financial solutions or perhaps other MDM solutions in there, or limited by that. It's important that your solution understand FHIR and the many variations of HL7, as Renee was talking about, the non-standard standard. So taking that healthcare specific workflows, data models, and specific to being able to take functions of a more traditional EMPI and the needed functions of an MPI and consolidate that to one single platform that focuses on identity verification, the master data management, the trusted source, the 360-degree view, the golden record, and able to do data enrichment. A lot of organizations are focusing on the SDOH data, and even with the clinical architecture, we have aspects of enriching the data in that healthcare platform. So those are some of the unique things about Verato's healthcare specific.
Thank you so much for that insight, Cheryl. Renee, I also want to ask you, what was the most complex aspect of the initiative and why?
Well, there was a couple of things that I would say that made it complex. One is we had a lot of vendors involved. You know, we couldn't just say, hey, we're gonna focus on patient mastering and get that down. Hey, we're gonna focus on, you know, normalizing the data. Or now we're gonna focus on being able to syntactically do it where we can put it in any format. So we had to do it all at once to reach the goal of the use cases we were doing. And in addition, like I spoke about before, our Google GCP environment didn't exist. Even our Health Catalyst environment didn't exist. And then we had to also do Google HDE. So all of that was happening at the same time. And we had to coordinate with all those vendors.
Thank you so much, Renee. And to circle back just a little bit, could you drill down a little bit further into how the 41 lives were saved?
On the aspect, you know, I don't think I could talk a little bit more in the details. You know, it is from the data, right? You know, and our clinical team is at the hospital working with the clinicians there from what they're seeing in dashboards. In other words, for example, if you're not getting fluids enough in sepsis soon enough, right? Or you didn't pick up something that they have fluid around their heart with a heart failure. It depends on the situation. So what they're seeing is, oh, hey, there's some lab results and maybe you should look at this patient. Or even that you've noticed that they have something in their history that may cause them to have more issues with the diagnosis they have. And all of that together comes together where they were able to see and then change maybe the care or ensure that they're getting it in a timely manner of the care they need.
Thank you again, Renee. And lastly, how would you say you went about selecting the vendors that you chose?
Good question. We did not have the time to do a full-fledged RFP, and so we did try to take the idea of doing that, a formalized, do some of the steps that you need to do, make sure that, especially in healthcare, they have to be secure. So we had to make sure architecturally that everything would be secure and run it through, a risk assessment. We needed to talk with the vendors. We did that, multiple times, because we want to ensure that not only what their demo is, get to know them, see what their products can do. Customer references. We also reached out to peers in the healthcare. What products have you used? Why? Did you like them? And like I said, collaborating and getting it together, architecting the view, knowing that they really understood our vision is what helped us choose the different vendors.
Thank you again, Renee, and everyone. That is all the time we have for today. I would very much like to thank Bonnie, Cheryl, and Renee for a wonderful discussion. And many thanks, of course, to Verato and Clinical Architecture for sponsoring today's webinar. To learn more about the content presented today, please fill out the post-webinar survey. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.